Welcome back. In a defiant 72-minute address at the World Economic Forum in Davos on Wednesday, U.S. President Donald Trump reasserted a maximalist foreign policy that combines territorial ambitions in the Arctic with racially charged rhetoric regarding South Africa. The speech, described by critics as a stump speech for a domestic audience, signaled a significant shift in U.S. diplomatic priorities, moving away from traditional alliances toward a Western civilization-centered worldview. Let's talk more on this with the director of the African Center for Studies of the United States at the University of Pretoria. That's Professor Christopher Isike. Prof, good to have you on the program this evening. So Trump's renewed push to acquire Greenland has been framed as a national security imperative. From an international relations perspective, how credible or even destabilizing is this claim?
Well, good evening, Clank. Thank you for having me. Look, it's a claim that distorted Greenland's history, essentially, and he parodied this distorted history when he said that the U.S. After the Second World War gave Greenland back to Denmark, and indicated that the U.S. was stupid, to have done that. But this is not correct, because what really happened was that in 1941, after the Nazi invasion of Denmark, it was a Danish ambassador then in the U.S. in Washington that forged this agreement, giving the United States the rights to military bases in Greenland in exchange for protection of the island. And those who have studied that phenomenon have indicated that this particular ambassador acted, went rogue when he did that. But in that agreement, it did not hand over the island to the United States. So the idea that the island was owned by the United States and that they can get it back now and he wants it is critical to U.S. security is false, because the U.S., by that agreement until date, have had access to the Greenland, through the military bases. They can do and do anything they want to do there. And you don't need to own the island for you to be able to use it as a bait to protect yourself.
But what does this Greenland rhetoric tell us about the current state of U.S.-EU relations, especially given the European Parliament's move to suspend trade discussions?
Well, it is showing that the relationship is really going sour. The indications are there. And I think the parliament of many of these countries are beginning to come to terms with the fact that, like the Canadian Prime Minister said in his speech, the old order is gone and they need to live with the new reality. My only worry about that is that they say one thing, the leaders say one thing on the one hand, and then when they see Mr. Trump on the other hand, they become the usual demure people, and they shouldn't be surprised by what he's doing, because initially when he did all of these things to Gaza, they complied. When he did it to Venezuela, they didn't have any issues. Now he's doing it to one of their own, Denmark, and suddenly they are complaining, and it goes to the bottom of the very racist thinking, the bifurcation of people into being zones of beings and non-beings, with the Europeans being the beings and the rest of us being non-beings who will benefit from the crumbs of the table of the humans. So the world is in a dilemma right now, and we need leaders who will not just do the talk, but walk the talk as well.
The world is in a dilemma right now, but very interesting, Prof, is that Trump insists he won't use force, but adds that, and I quote, "We will remember," close quote, if Denmark says no. How should smaller states then interpret this kind of language from a superpower, really?
Well, it's a veiled threat to say that we will punish you however we can for this, and so you better think twice about it. But I don't think that it is something that will fly with the government of Denmark, the peoples of Denmark, the peoples of the Greenland, and many Europeans who will see this as a sign that they could be next if they allow this to happen.
But is this an episode of an example of strategic realism, or does it point to a more personal, transactional style of diplomacy that departs from traditional U.S. foreign policy norms that we know?
Yes, it is. It is actually, in my view, that you know, what we are seeing actually, and maybe before I say what I wanted to say, there's a ray of hope, a light in the tunnel. Because of the American system, you know, all of these things can change overnight with the stroke of a pen through an executive order by a Democrat president who will simply undo all of these things. But Mr. Trump has broken the trust of his own traditional allies in the West, and whether they would go back to normalize the relationship, especially after the trust is broken, is a different thing. But to come back to your point, for me, there are two convergences here. It's Trumpism and imperial greed. So Mr. Trump is showing this personalized and very assertive foreign policy, but they are based on the whims and caprices of one person, Mr. Donald Trump. He has this fantasy to be amongst, if not the best president in American history, whatever that means. And this is a personal goal that fuels the audacious actions that we have seen him take, whether it be in Iran or Venezuela, and now with Greenland. And then in terms of the imperial greed, he's a very greedy man and won't mind a group of business executives cornering him in the case of Venezuela to say, look, the oil under the ground was ours, they nationalized it, we can have it back, you have what it takes to do it. He doesn't like Maduro, he aligns with that, but the real thing here is he wants everything for himself. And the last point I'll make about this, to underscore this point, is the several contradictions that tells you that there's really no method to all we are seeing from the U.S. Right now. So I will mention 2 or 3 contradictions. The one is he wanted to attack Iran, you know, for killing its own citizens, protesting against the government, indicating therefore that he cared for ordinary Iranians. But the same Mr. Trump now wants to deport Iranians, who are in the U.S., back to the same government he claims are killing their citizens. The second one, he bombed terrorists in Nigeria for killing Christians, indicating he cared for Nigerian Christians. But the same Mr. Trump is using visa bans to prevent the same Nigerians from entering the U.S. And then, of course, you can look at the example of the Venezuelans, where he said he wanted to liberate them from a predator president by kidnapping him, but he left everyone else in that regime in place who are involved in terrorizing Venezuela. So the question is, if there's any logic, if there's any method and order to this, besides the madness that was in all of this madness, we would see different outcomes, we'll see consistency and coherence, and maybe some principle as well, but we're not seeing any of this. So that tells me that's all about him, and when he leaves office, a lot of these things are likely to crumble. But the trust deficit that's already been experienced will be something that will make the world different from how it was before 2025.
Professor Isike, before I let you go, I wanted to turn to energy policy as well. Trump did double down on fossil fuels while dismissing renewable energy as a green scam. How out of step is this position with the global economic and climate trends as well?
Well, it's a dissonance with what the reality is, and he's always made it clear that he doesn't believe in climate change. He calls it a hoax. We're not surprised by this, and that's what is informing his craze for chasing after oil everywhere he can, of course, with rare earths as well, not caring about the environmental implications of all of these things. So it works for him and his cronies who are interested in milking as much as they can from resources, not just in the US, but everywhere else in the world. And I think that like I said before, the personal greed of Trumpism and those of core business people around him are what drive essentially what he's doing right now.
Yeah, I want us to expand that a bit more. What are the implications of such rhetoric, especially for global climate cooperation? Also, especially at a forum like Davos that is meant to foster multilateral solutions?
Well, he's already withdrawn the U.S. from all climate agreements in the world. So it means that the U.S. will not be bothered by those. It's now, the implications is that the rest of the world will either have to sit and mourn past that history, that have nostalgia, like the Canadian president said in his speech, or decide to take matters in their own hands by forming a new order based around, rules and cooperation between different countries of the world. And he's challenged middle powers, including middle powers like Canada. I would like to think that South Africa is also a middle power, given the leadership they showed in the case of Israel. All of these countries, whether you are middle power or weak power, however you want to categorize yourself, there is a benefit of protection that comes with collectivism, and everyone should begin to strive and move away from a world order that's led by the US, unless, of course, they come back from all of it and try to work their way backwards.
And finally, Prof, very quickly, South Africa was notably absent from Trump's speech. In geopolitical terms, does being off the radar of U.S. attention help or hurt countries like South Africa right now?
Well, look, South Africa has been on the radar for a very long time. He has more urgent matters that he's dealing with. South Africa right now is the least of his problems. It's a good thing that South Africa is off his lips for now, but I would like to think that it's temporary. Remember, many of these things he's not doing them all by himself. There are people around him who bring up these issues and put narratives before him, and then he starts shooting with his tweets. So at some point, especially if we don't give the Starlink license to Mr. Musk, we could have a revival at some point in time to come. But also the question of South Africa's belonging to BRICS, because BRICS is a major issue as a result because of the de-dollarization matter. And for me, I can tell you, de-dollarization is a major issue right now. Many people are not talking about that, but it's one of the core fears that the current government has, because it is de-dollarization is something that the US can actually go to war for because of its impact on their economy. And BRICS countries are already engaging with trade with one another outside of the US dollars. And so it's one of the considerations that led to South Africa being in the firing line, because the thinking is that if you can target the low-hanging fruits like South Africa, you could help to dissuade them from going fully into this arrangement. It's a failed strategy, because all it does is to drive even allies away from you, like Canada has done now by going to China.
Professor Christopher Isike, thank you so much for your insight and for helping us unpack the geopolitical signals behind President Trump's Davos address, from Greenland to global energy politics. We do appreciate your time.